What's the most unreasonable request you've received from your boss? 1. Jane has just told me that she's pregnant. I need you to fire her immediately before she puts it in writing. Jane had been employed by the company for about 3 years, and whilst her performance didn't set the world alight, she certainly wasn't terrible. There was absolutely no justification to dismiss her. I challenged the VP who made the request and said that even if there was a justification, now that he knows she is pregnant, we need to follow very careful processes. He said that as Jane hadn't put it in writing, he didn't actually know about it. I corrected that view and told him that I now knew as he had told me and was not going to perjure myself when, not if, we got taken to court for unfair dismissal. In the end, I put a halt to the conversation and said that it isn't going to happen and that I think we need to stop talking about it. I spoke to the chief people officer, my boss's boss, and told her what I had been asked to do. I was asked to put the details in writing and the VP was suspended and dismissed within a few days. Apparently there had been some issues with him before I joined the business, but I mean, what kind of person terminates someone who is pregnant unless there is a really good reason to do it? 2. It was my last day at work. I basically came just for 2 hours, for an exit interview and get my final paycheck. The boss catches me walking down the hall and asked me to fix a problem he had just before I leave. I went down to accounting, got my pay, then clocked out for the final time and left. 3. When I was younger, I had a horrible manager named Susan. She would always throw us under the bus and lie to her boss to make herself look good. She also had horrible time management skills. One week the company was unusually busy with orders. Susan told everyone no overtime would be allowed. Susan also promised an impossible amount of orders would be completed before Friday. When Friday came, we were roughly 25 orders behind what she had promised. We would usually process and ship 15-20 per day. I got off at 2 p.m. At 1:30 Susan came up to me and asked if I would mind doing another 5 orders. That would have taken me around 3 hours. I told her I didn't mind. She then asked me, would you mind clocking out before doing them? Obviously, I told her I would not be doing that, and asking me to do so violated labor laws. She wasn't a manager there much longer, and I still hate the name Susan because of her. 4. Worked at a mom and pop home center, owned by 2 guys. One told me I needed to take his pickup to the big city, 100 miles away, to pick up some special order lumber for one of our customers. Not a big deal, but one of his front tires has cord showing. The inside steel belts were coming out. He told me to ignore it and go. I refused. He told his partner, who cornered me and told me I was the employee and would do what I was told. I got him to follow me to the parking lot, showed him the steel belts coming apart and told him there was no way in hell I was driving that fucking truck. Half hour later he asked if I would drive it to the tire store a few blocks away so they could put tires on it and then drive it to get the stuff. I said I would and did. 5. Not me, but the guy in the office next to mine, and I overheard the conversation. Mike had turned in his 2 weeks notice and spent the time organizing his files and projects, which was a pretty respectable thing to do. The boss came in right before lunch on his last day and said, I need you to get me up to speed on what all you've been working on. Mike just laughed and said, if you wanted to know what I was doing, you should have asked me 6 months ago, not today. I'm going to lunch. All my projects are organized on my desk. Good luck. The boss told me later that he was shocked that Mike, who had a reputation as a nice guy, would turn out to show such attitude. I laughed and told him Mike was right. A little background. The company had been downsizing for a couple of years by direct layoffs and not replacing people who quit or retired. Our department had gone from 23 people to 11 while the workload had at least doubled. I was the first in a group of 3 to get fed up and quit for a new job. I worked a bit longer than the 2 weeks so I could leave at the end of the month. Mike turned in his notice 2 days after me. Just after we left, another guy, Bill, turned in his notice. He called me and said he had to thank me for his extra vacation. Turned out that when the vice president was told that Bill was quitting, he flew into a rage and said, this is all because Rick got another job for more money. The other employees talked to him and decided they could get more money, too. Send Bill home for his 2 weeks so he doesn't infect anyone else with this nonsense. So Bill went home for 2 weeks, with full pay, and got all sorts of projects done, painting and gardening, and then moved on to his new job. The company took a hard look at what we had been working on and ended up hiring 9 people to replace the 3 of us. Some of those people quit within months because the workload was too much for them. Needless to say, we did not regret our decisions to leave. 6. I used to fly for a self-made billionaire. He was very tight with money most of the time, unless it was for pet projects or basketball games. At the time we only had 1 plane. He was out of town with it and his wife had used a chartered plane for her trip. Since I wasn't working that day I headed to the gym early so I could beat rush hour traffic. As I was getting into my car the boss called. He just rattled off a list of things I needed to go buy and put in their refrigerator for his wife since she'd been gone a few days. I just said okay, then called one of the guys at the hangar and gave them the order. I want to point out that I was not above doing that. But between the boss and his wife, they had 5 assistants. 5. Fetching groceries is not in a pilot's job description, but that's the way they were. If they were paying you they felt they could ask you to do anything. We all had their security code and code to garage so that we could drop off items left on the plane or even collect things before a flight. That was no big deal, but asking us to grocery shop was a little over the line. 7. A coworker was telling me about what happened to her after I had left the company. The company was dying. They had been eliminating positions to prevent going under. She was one of the most skilled employees left in many areas, including writing computer code. However, she was also slightly older and had recently found out she was pregnant. Because of her age, It was considered a high-risk pregnancy. She had been given a list of activities that had to be completed before she went on maternity leave, which they kept adding to, right up to the time she was expected to deliver. One of the last additions to her list was to write a program for something that had to be done by a certain date. Well, due to her age, it was decided that she should be induced early to reduce the risks to her and her baby. But, because of its late addition to her list of must-do, she hadn't started writing the program yet. Her supervisor said, in all seriousness, well, I hope you can write code while you are in labor. She did try to write the code while in labor but didn't finish before the baby was born. Her supervisor tried unsuccessfully to discipline her for not completing it before the baby was born. After her maternity leave was finished, she started looking for another job. The company went under shortly after she left.